Thank you, Jill, and thank you everyone for attending today. I hope you find the information helpful. As Jill mentioned, we are going to talk about how disaster recovery planning works in a post-COVID-19 world. We're talking a lot about this stuff now, not just in our webinar, but in some of our other materials, which you can check out on the website. Really important subject. Things have changed with how we work, even as maybe the vaccine rolls out and maybe restrictions start coming back and people maybe get back into the office. I still think DR planning and the way we work has pretty much permanently changed. So let's get into it. So, disaster recovery planning isn't new at all. This is, most organizations were familiar with the core ideas of DR planning, especially as we became more reliant on technology for our core operations. So, I think if 20 years ago, you said to somebody, hey, what's your DR plan? They might say, what are you talking about? But everybody today knows they need to have some kind of backstop to deal with the unexpected. COVID-19, it itself is kind of a test of our disaster recovery. It wasn't something that people thought about when they thought about their disaster recovery plans. I think most people, when they thought about it, were thinking about things like, what if even very unlikely scenarios, what if the building is on fire? What if our server fails or something? Or what if we're hit with a cyber attack? Things that are very familiar with them. But we did have to respond to COVID-19 in many ways like we did, like we would for other disasters. We had to tell people how they were going to work, how they needed to communicate, how to get support, all of these other things that are very symptomatic of a disaster recovery scenario. The world itself has permanently changed. So again, even as we go back to think, maybe the way things were before, as the health situation improves, I don't think everybody's going to necessarily be back in the office. We'll definitely have more people leveraging cloud solutions and hosted solutions where the recovery is just different than it was before. We have to reevaluate our plans with work from home in general. Business expectations, priorities have shifted. There's different resources that are available, and they're all making an impact on the landscape. So today, let's just talk about a few of these new considerations as we revisit our DR plans. So today's agenda, just a few items, and we can't cover everything with DR planning, so make sure you get your questions in, or feel free to follow up with me after the webinar if I don't cover it. First, we want to revisit and possibly redefine disasters. So it's really important that, if we're going to establish a DR plan, that we outline exactly what a disaster is, what's covered. We should talk a little bit about shifts in the technology landscape. The way we are computing and using technology now is different than even maybe 3 or 4 years ago, which is way different than the way things were 20 years ago and in Windows XP time, if you will. So it's important to talk about that because DR plans need to evolve with the times. Bring your own device and work from home and infrastructure we don't directly control or manage. So most businesses today are either dealing with people working remotely, or they're maybe they're working in a hotel or something like that, or with networks that they don't control, or they're using, they just got a new cell phone and they're now accessing data with that stuff. There's a lot of aspects of this that we just don't have under our control anymore. It's important to acknowledge and understand how that impacts our plans. Personnel considerations. So obviously, the way people work and the way people act has changed. We're going to talk about that. Communication changes, with people more spread out, with expectations shifted, there is some differences in how we communicate with people. Where to start, of course, we're going to talk about a lot of things, and I know when we talk about a lot of things, it gets very intimidating, so we have to sort of start at the beginning and say, well, what's a good step moving forward? What's the best way to eat an elephant is taking the first bite, so to speak. I know I maybe I butchered that a little bit. And then, of course, Q&A. So what is a disaster now? And again, we need to understand what these things are. If we're not addressing these things in our plan, then there's no way we're going to be able to respond to them effectively, which at the end of the day is going to cost us money, resources, and potentially put us in legal trouble if we're not able to respond to it just because we didn't plan for it. So there's the obvious ones, there's ransomware, malware, phishing attacks, other security-related incidents that require a fast and significant response. The the fact that these things exist has not changed. However, the impact of them has changed significantly. Uh, if people are more spread out and they're utilizing more cloud resources, maybe the effect of a ransomware attack on a local machine may not be as impactful. However, the employee might be much more susceptible to phishing and social engineering, as they lack the organizational culture that helps people avoid these things and alert people when attacks on the user are engaged. Fire, floods, and other facility-related incidents are still disasters. So, speaking for myself personally, I'm doing this from my living room right now, so I'm working from home. But even if that happened, I imagine if something happened to our main office in Columbia, Maryland, I would still have an impact. I would need to understand how that impacted us. We do leverage to the cloud. I'd be able to keep working, but obviously knowing that, for example, our service desk is relocated would have an impact on how we work. Natural disasters could be impactful in a different way. So, I mean, think about how a hurricane that, we're here in Maryland, so we don't get hit too badly by hurricanes here, but obviously like Florida, the southeast part of the United States, you could have people who are out of work for a long time or unable to communicate because they don't have power, they don't have access to their homes. Another great example was that weird winter storm in Texas in, I guess it was February or March, where they experienced those really low temperatures, and all of a sudden people lost power and didn't have water and things like that. Well, a lot of those people were probably remote workers trying to do things they would otherwise do in the office. Well, now a natural disaster that may not impact your main location, you may have your facility up and running. It may impact your entire workforce just because they're not located centrally. So most of the disasters are the same, but the impacts have really changed. So we really should be considering any event that could have an impact on our ability to be productive, impact the lives of our staff, require a legal or media response, or is the type of event that puts your organization on high alert. So, again, most of the disasters haven't really changed. We should still be considering everything. It's just how they impact us that has changed, and then by extension, change our DR plans. So we should also talk about shifts in the technology landscape and how we need to consider them in our DR planning. So right now, I imagine most people on this call are probably utilizing more cloud or software as a service solutions. So we're less dependent on central offices, internet connections, power, and other things associated with traditional IT disasters. Everybody knows about the traditional server closet. If a server fails all of a sudden, nobody can work, nobody can access their email because we have this Exchange server locally, and now this sort of communication post is completely dead. Or the office lost its power and we don't have enough battery backup power, we don't have a generator, and now our entire operation is shut down. If I can work from home and I'm leveraging, for example, the Microsoft public cloud, it doesn't, as long as I have power, as long as Microsoft has power, it doesn't really matter where I am, I can get these things done. And that's going to make an impact on how we tell people how to respond to a disaster. If the building's the office building loses power, I could just tell people to go home and work if I'm fully leveraging cloud solutions, and that's a huge benefit. Mobile devices have improved overall functionality, giving people the ability to get jobs done with minimal hardware requirements. I mean, this is really important too. If we're utilizing more cloud solutions, things that are less platform dependent, and mobile devices that are very versatile in terms of accessing things either from a browser or a dedicated app, or maybe it has a lighter version of a full-blown operating system when you look at, say, an item like a Windows Surface device. This functionality really gives us the ability, if we need to set someone up quickly with a technology solution, an ability to do that fast without losing a lot of functionality. It's pretty neat that, an iPad, you could still get a lot of your email done. You could use QuickBooks Online, Salesforce, any number of applications, and maybe get almost all of your functionality back that you would have with a traditional PC in an office. So that's really important to consider. Work from home has provided connectivity from many locations, but also a larger footprint to manage with new risks. So we're going to talk about this more later, but instead of really worrying about, say, our firewall and router and switch and devices in a main location and the Wi-Fi for that location, now I have maybe 50 employees working from their homes, and each of them is running their own wireless access point with, and maybe some of them are doing the right things, changing the admin creds, etc. But how do we know that all of them are doing that? And what if they have an insecure home network, which leads to a breach of our data? Well, that's a bad thing, and we now need to consider that as part of our DR planning. How do we respond to those kinds of security incidents? Compatibility just in general is better. So again, there's more we can do, more flexibility for getting back up and running. There's also the idea of this, you call it X as a service, really anything as a service has turned many technology products into subscription models. So even if I was leveraging a lot of stuff locally in a server closet, we may look at it as a disaster to shift the way we work and utilize something that would have a more monthly predictable cost. So it may be that if you have a system that you're leveraging a lot right now locally, and something bad happens, you may need to have as part of your DR plan a way to shift that to that subscription model. Again, this doesn't necessarily apply to everybody. Everyone's plan is different. Everyone's technology is different. But it's just another thing to keep in mind as we develop our plans so that we understand the disasters, how we respond to them, and what things look like moving forward. The rise of bring your own device in every workplace. So I think pretty much now it's the expectation that there are employee devices or personal devices being used in the workplace. Very few organizations that we work with or see out there have an environment where everybody's using the corporate issued PC or laptop as well as a corporate issued phone. I remember when I started out, I was given a BlackBerry that was on the company's cell phone plan. This is back in 2005, if people even know what a BlackBerry is anymore, although they still exist. But anyway, the point is that the expectation really is that people generally have their own iPhone or Android phone, and this is impacting the way we work and our DR. Apps are an expectation as opposed to a bonus feature for many applications. So software is really expected to be mobile friendly. Not every application that is out there, business application or point of business, or whatever you want to call it, business database, CRM, ERP, whatever. Not everybody is going to be using totally mobile friendly stuff. As it gets more specialized, as you tend to become more dependent on the hardware platform you use, you probably won't see some of these features. But a lot of the more popular commercial products are mobile friendly. Just a great example, pretty much everything related to Microsoft and Office 365 is now app-based now, even on their competitors' platforms like the Apple iOS. And so this is a great thing for us in our DR planning. We can generally create ways to create new functionality with dissimilar devices. Work from home in general has required us to deal with more devices. So even if people were using some bring your own device stuff before, chances are when they started doing work from home, they probably started incorporating their iPad or their personal cell phone more to do their work. A lot of people, I think, in the past were, well, once I bring my phone into the office, I'm not really going to do work on it. I'm just going to do my work directly on my work issued device. But now when people are working from home, I think they feel a little bit more comfortable just using those home devices in a more significant way, either bringing them into the fold or adopting them and just using them more. I do think there are many implications for this. One is that we need to make sure that people know the proper use of personal devices and that they're properly set up with the right controls and security that those devices need to have so that our data is protected. There has to be a compromise between the freedom of using these devices as well as the security needed to take care of them and protect our data. Furthermore, it means that a data breach can extend to a lot of devices that we didn't necessarily deal with before. So that iPad is now a new point of attack. So if something happens on that device, even though we don't own it, we may be responsible for what happens on it. These devices aren't just phones and tablets, but like hotspots as well. Internet connections outside the office have compromises like lower bandwidth, data caps, and increased latency. So consider the fact that as you send people to work, however, whenever they want, they're also going to be using very diverse internet connections. So I'm at my home, I'm using a Verizon Fios connection. This is really no problem for the stuff I want to do. I have plenty of bandwidth. I could do pretty much everything I do in the office and notice no difference. But if someone's in a rural area, maybe they're using a satellite connection. Maybe they have to use a 4G hotspot that has high latency and maybe doesn't handle virtual meetings very well or webinars very well. Maybe they just have a connection that is near a tree line. I had a client one time that lived out in the country, and every time there was a storm, this one particular tree was like banging into the line and taking their T1 down for a series of time. Those things happen. And so we have a little bit more of those types of points of failure, and people need to know how to adapt in the event that their personal environment fails. How can they respond? How can they work? And how can they communicate with their managers so that they're able to keep working even in their own personal incidents? Because that stuff's going to happen. There's also network devices that we have minimal control over and are often neglected at homes of staff. So again, I talked about this a little bit before, but let's really get into it now. At a typical home, you're going to have whatever their internet connection, the device provided by their providers, from Comcast, Verizon, you name it, some kind of router or access point to the outside internet. They may also have whether it's integrated into that leased box or not, there's going to be some kind of wireless, most likely. Most people aren't using a fully wired stuff inside their home anymore, but they're going to have some sort of access point. Maybe it's separate, maybe it's together. Maybe in some places you may have other things like actual switches if you have enough wiring in the house, or they may have multiple internet connections, whatever. These are devices that need the same maintenance and uptime and upkeep that the ones in our main fleet of devices have, which means they need to make sure they get firmware patches and updates. They need to be kept in a supportable condition by the vendor. So if the vendor is not providing them with security updates anymore, we shouldn't be really using them to do sensitive work on them. If the admin credentials are not changed away from their defaults, then somebody from the outside could see this device on the network, go in and start causing trouble that way. And so we need to set some parameters. If you're going to be working from home or using foreign devices, we need to have some basic controls. Do you have an IT guy or someone within your home that comes in to update these devices, make sure they're in good shape, make sure they're in a supportable state? Have you changed these things? Do you know how to do it? If not, well, can we set you up with this person we know who can help configure that for you? It's worth it to invest a little bit of time to make sure that people have reasonably secure home networks. We're not creating Fort Knoxes here, but we want to create an environment that's reasonably secured and not a so-called low-hanging fruit for the bad guys to attack. There's also just general personnel considerations. So this is kind of outside the actual technology. This is more about how we work with people. Staff needs extra documentation and training on work procedures, instructions, support, and other areas where they're going to be more independent than in the past. So, I'm going to be working from home, and something bad happens. Well, I can't go to my boss's office and just knock on their door and say, "Hey, explain these three things to me." It's going to be harder to reach these people. We need people to have all this information in advance. They need to know exactly where they're going to find their documentation. When a disaster happens, they need to know exactly who they're going to be communicated with. We need our people to be more of an expert about what a disaster could look like and what their experience is, which might mean you take a few minutes to talk to your staff and say, "Hey, please review this plan," or let's have a conversation about some of the typical things that could potentially happen and how we might expect you to respond. And again, we don't need to make a federal case out of it, but we do want to make sure that people are extra aware of what these plans are, because they're not going to have that support that they once had. While in the event of a significant disaster, allowances may be necessary. We need to be clear on acceptable use and not allowing shadow IT. So, um, everybody in March of 2020 all of a sudden gets sent home to work from home, and a lot of businesses were adapting on the fly. And so people didn't really know what they were doing at first. Maybe they were using their own webinar tools if they want to do a virtual meeting. Maybe they decided to use Dropbox because they were having trouble with their local technology. Some of that's understandable for an unprecedented event, but and we want to make allowances. We want to be flexible with people so people can keep working. But it needs to be clear that the idea of shadow IT, which is technology solutions that are unknown, unauthorized, have no monitoring, no visibility on them, are not acceptable, that we can't use that, and that there has to still be acceptable use rules, right? You know what? Because we're in a bad place right now, we're letting you use, yeah, and again, I'm not saying that this is a position we should always take, but, because our file transfer solution is down because of this cyber attack on them, we are going to allow you temporarily to use Dropbox for the next week, but you have to do this, this, and this to make that happen. There's a compromise here. It's understandable if people need to use alternative technology solutions, but there has to be full transparency and awareness of that stuff so that we can keep control of it. People just may be less accessible in the past on short notice, but more flexibility to respond. So, and one thing I also wrote here is that DR plans should have backup contacts and procedures. So, again, just to give you my own situation, I'm working from home. I'm pretty much accessible most of the time now. However, I might be on the other line. I'm on this webinar right now. I even saw during the webinar, I'm getting these Teams things popping up, right? Nobody really, I mean, people could see my calendar. They know I'm in a webinar, but they may not be immediately aware of this. So I'm not really 100% accessible right now, but if someone needed to talk to me at 7 o'clock at night, I might be available. We just need to keep all this in mind. And so I think a good DR plan has to have backup contacts. If we're in the middle of a ransomware attack and our primary responder on our management team is not available, for whatever reason, they're sick, they may have COVID for all we know. There's whatever issue that's going on. Somebody else has to be ready waiting for that call and be their backup more than ever before, because we just don't know where people are, what their situation is. That connectivity isn't quite the same as it once was. Communication. So this sort of goes along with the personnel considerations. Obviously, it's not enough to rely on company email to communicate your DR status. One thing we do, we use SMS services, so we can send a text to everybody at our office. So, this started with, in the past with snow and stuff like that, 6 inches of snow, DPS is open, you can work from home, whatever the thing is. But this could also extend to DRs, hey, our email system is down, our servers are down, we're using this SMS service, we're sending a text message to our staff letting them know whatever the situation is. Of course, people should know what services, what SMS our team uses or what is authorized so that we can avoid phishing with fake texts and things like that. So there needs to be communication on when people will receive that sort of message. It's really important to keep a directory of cell phones, alternate emails, emergency contacts, etc. So we should really know how to reach everybody no matter what at any time. Kind of amazing that in this day and age that I say that, but it really does exist. People don't know how to reach their employees. Same thing with vendor contacts. So anybody who is impacted by your disaster, which includes your vendors, DP Solutions, for example, maybe your vendor for IT services, you need to be able to contact us if there's some kind of disaster, and we should be listed in your DR plan somewhere. DP Solutions helps us restore our data from our Datto solution, whatever the situation is. That should be in there. Keep track of your stakeholders and outsiders who would need to be contacted in the event of a disaster. So a stakeholder is really anybody who's a part of the response to the DR plan, is impacted by a disaster, whatever. There's also outsiders you may need to be contact. So, like for example, with HIPAA, if you have a data breach of a significant amount, you need to inform the media. Well, you should have that information available if that's relevant to you. Same thing with customers, lawyers, the government, um, you know, banks that you work with, you know, people who, if you were in the middle of a disaster, should have some awareness of it if they need you. So where do you start? It's a lot of stuff. We talked about you know, many but not all changes to how we've worked. But it might be difficult if you're just trying to start a DR plan. Um, uh, or if you have something already and you just feel it's inadequate for 2021. A few tips from me. Take inventory of your technology assets, sensitive data, and resources. A lot of people think about DR plans and they purely think about getting back up and running, but they don't think about it from the opposite direction, which is what is it that we're trying to recover, and what is the value of it? You know, what assets do we have, both hardware and data, of course, because data is the one that you can't replace, and often has more cost associated with it, as well as resources you have to respond to your DR plan. I've talked about all this great stuff that you can do, but realistically speaking, especially for a small business, you're not going to be able to have a 100% foolproof, amazing DR plan just because you're not a big business. You know, it's probably unreasonable for many businesses to recover a failed server in a matter of minutes because they lack the resources to do that. It's important to sort of understand and take inventory of where you're at with this stuff so that your plans can be realistic. Take your previous plan, if there is one, and highlight areas that just don't make sense anymore. So read through it and just mark off stuff that is either I'm not sure this is right or doesn't make sense anymore. And sort of similarly, if you read through it and then a bunch of things come to mind, take notes on that and say, well, what about this, 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 and this? You can use the stuff we talked about today as a reference. You can use other DR plans as a reference. You know, there are many publicly available DR plans that you can view. One of the tips later, spoilers, is, you know, use templates from SANS Institute, SANS Institute, or there are many academic, you know, colleges and universities as well as businesses that publicize their DR plans and let you, you know, lift language from them. Take a look at those things and think, you know, where might this apply to me, and what can I add into it? Make sure your plans consider disasters that are practical and relevant after COVID-19. You know, if you went from having everybody in the office 40 hours a week to we're not even operating an office anymore, this is the, you know, the way we work now is entirely remotely because the office didn't make sense. Your DR plan simply should not mention the office. There are businesses, obviously, that are not going back to the way things were in any way. So you need to consider just what's relevant now. Don't feel bad if you discover your plan's lacking. There is no perfect plan. I think this is really important because this idea that, you know, the whole idea of planning, and whether this is DR planning or IT strategic planning or security planning or whatever it is that this is always a work in progress, that we should put together a product that we feel good about, that is robust, that has been reviewed and considered, shared with the team, all this stuff, but that it doesn't stop, that we have to review it in a way that's reasonable, perhaps every 6 months, perhaps every year. It all depends on what is appropriate for your organization. But don't beat yourself up when something's missing. These plans were created by imperfect people who made decisions that were probably sound at the time and over time became less relevant. We just have to adjust and adapt and grow. And the more we do this, the better our plans will be in the future, and the better we'll be at making technology decisions in the future. So don't feel bad about that stuff. Don't be afraid at all. This is maybe the biggest tip. Everybody asks me about policy all the time and coming up with DR plans. Find templates. There are so many templates. You can go to Google and you could just say disaster recovery plan template, and you'll find a billion things. You'll find, again, SANS Institute, a great resource. There's a lot out there, and you shouldn't plagiarize, of course. You should do things that are legal, but don't be afraid to use these resources that are available to you. Even when experts are coming up with these plans, we need other people's insights and language. So to wrap it up before we get into Q&A, so, DR plans are traditionally focused on a way we work that is more reminiscent of the typical 9-to-5 office. I mean, this isn't going to surprise anybody. And we don't quite work that way anymore. I suspect, even organizations that'll probably get a little bit back to normal, I just think that there's some permanent changes that are going to occur. So really now is a good time to look at this, especially if we're in this zone that we're in right now, kind of where things are just sort of starting to creep back open. We want to be in a position where when when normal is established, let's say in maybe late 2021 or maybe 2022 or whenever it is, that we're in a position to be ready for it. So now is really a good time to look at this stuff. A disaster to your organization is going to be based on the impact of the business. So you can look at all the templates and stuff you want, and all of these recommendations have this in your DR plan. But the most important thing is that we have to understand what the most impactful events are to us, how they impact us, what they impact, what asset impacts, and define our plan based on that. If we're thinking of doing things simply because other people did them, well, that's not good enough. We need to do things based on how they would impact us. And every one of our goals regarding disaster recovery planning should be about minimizing impacts for us. So focus on the consequences. Finally, planning needs to be consistent and reviewed. So planning is an ongoing process. We have to review it over and over and over again. That should be part of the plan. In other words, if we're going to say that we're going to reread the plan every 3 months and do a full scrub every year, that's what it should say in the plan. Whatever is comfortable, there's not necessarily a right answer, but it should be reviewed. That is a requirement. COVID-19 has taught us that it's very difficult to anticipate every practical incident, so we have to have plans B, C, D, etc. Again, I really think, as unusual as people had pandemics and public health emergencies in DR plans before. I've read them, but I think for most people it was a oversight. There was a company I dealt with back in when I used to do more advice on consulting for compliance that. I was looking at their DR plan and they're like, wow, we really have to, I wrote this thing in about pandemics, but it's so weird. Like, I don't think that's ever going to happen. And it's lo and behold, these things actually did come true. It may not be likely that, God forbid a terrorist attack happens, but we should have plans about things that could happen as a result of that attack if we're, say, in downtown Washington, D.C. or something like, a place where it can be impacted. We just have to consider it. It doesn't mean we invest all this money and go crazy over it, but we should be aware that these things could happen. So anyway, that's it in terms of the main content. Get your questions in so we can answer them. You'll see my contact information, both email, phone, and also if you want to see my stuff that we post a lot of things on LinkedIn, articles, other panels, other events we do with other organizations about cybersecurity, IT best practices, etc. Please feel free to contact me on there. In May, we're going to have a cyber liability insurance webinar with our partners at RK Tung Insurance and Beasley Insurance. So more to come on that. Essentially, we want to talk about, you're getting into cyber liability insurance. What do you need to do? What are the common things? How can we get things moving forward? And while I'm not an expert on insurance itself, I'm going to talk a little bit about being prepared for this stuff, and then we're going to have the experts talk about how it's important. I'm going to sort of guide that conversation as we go. So anyway, I'm really looking forward to that. Make sure you register. All that being said, Jill, I'm going to turn it back to you. I don't know if we have any questions.
Okay, yes, thanks, Ben. Like Ben said, if you have any questions, please throw them in the question box, and we'll get them answered. All right, our first question is, if my employees are working from home using their own devices, what restrictions should we put on those devices regarding their family?
Sure. So we have to be careful. People deserve their personal freedom and privacy. And so the good news is that for example, mobile device management software that will make sure that a lot of the security measures happen, that the apps get updated, that they don't, maybe sideload unsigned apps and things like that. The things that are potentially risky to those devices, they can be deployed without compromising a user's privacy and sharing their family photos or having access to their personal emails or anything like that. So that's one good thing. The other side of this, besides the technology management, is also the just personal management, which is to say, if you're really handling sensitive information on a laptop, let's say you've got some client info or healthcare information or stuff like that, and then your kid wants to use the laptop to play a game, you really owe it to yourself and your company and your clients and everybody who's impacted to make sure that that information is not accessible or manipulatable or anything like that to anybody but yourself. It means you have to close everything out. It means probably one good idea would be to set up a separate profile between you and other people in your home, so that that you have your stuff, and then your daughter or your husband or whoever has their stuff. Stuff like that. It's probably not going to be perfect, but there should be an expectation and a cultural sort of aspect that people understand that the information that is company related, organizationally related, you might access it on a personal device, but you still owe a responsibility to protect that information and make sure other people don't do bad things with it because they have access to that unit. So anyway, that's my general philosophy on it. If you have specific questions, you can follow up with me.
Okay, great. Yep. Our next question is, how should we store and share our DR plans in a way that is safe and reliable if we should need them?
That's a great question. So first, obviously, it should be stored in a secure place. It's not really, especially if it has sensitive information in it, it shouldn't be just on a website or something like that. Generally, I know I mentioned that some of these things are publicly available, but just whatever is publicly available shouldn't be risky. But the fact is, one copy should be obviously in your file server or your SharePoint or whatever you're using to manage data, just regular files, documents for your company. But I would also consider maybe an alternative location as well that people know about, just in case. Let's say for the sake of argument that we're using a OneDrive type or a SharePoint type solution for our files, and the doc is in there, and then Microsoft, for whatever reason, is completely unavailable. You might have somebody on your DR planning committee have a separate account with this file somewhere else, or stored on a local server or something like that. Just a place, it should be totally transparent, shouldn't be shadow IT, but having a backup location for it is a really good idea. And in the event that that stuff's not acceptable, these people on your DR team can share the DR plan with the rest of the staff. So multiple places is a good idea. Still within, it should all still be documented, easily accessible in the event of a disaster. And if you're doing that, you're doing pretty well, I think.
Okay, great. Okay, our next question comes in. What do you think is the biggest change in the future of DR planning post-COVID?
The biggest change to DR planning in the future post-COVID, I mean, I think there is going to be more discussion about about phishing as a disaster. Again, I think DR plans traditionally think about ransomware, and they think about system failures and stuff like that, which phishing can lead to. But I think a disaster that we're going to have to expect more of, unfortunately, is the disaster of, excuse me, the disaster of somebody's information getting out there, or credentials being compromised because they fell for a phishing incident, whether that was done through spear phishing, someone was targeted directly, a third-party data breach where creds were stolen from a website and then reused on some other site, whatever. These disasters, they're not taking your business down, it's not knocking out your servers or anything like that, but there could be liabilities to them. And as far as I'm concerned, these incidents are disasters. And I just think we're going to end up having to think about more of those user-based, how do we respond to type disasters, which a lot of people don't think about right now. It's also going to be complicated and added to by the fact that a lot of those traditional technology-based disasters may not even be relevant to as many organizations. Once you get rid of all the servers in an office and all the networking equipment in an office, and you're relying on cloud and SaaS stuff, you know, the generator in the office is less of a concern. I mean, it's still something you might have, but it's not. It doesn't take the same weight. So we're going to be thinking more about how do we create alternative work sites, how do we avoid those cybersecurity incidents, and things like that.
Okay, I do not see any other questions coming in. If you can wrap up.
All right, great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today. This is recorded, as Jill mentioned, so we'll have copies on the website. Again, my contact information is here on this slide. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Please register for our future webinars. Check out our blogs. We got videos on the site. We got everything. So if you go to dpsolutions.com, there's plenty to consume. So anyway, thanks so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.